Forrest Gump is one of the greatest masterpieces, but a lot depends on how deeply you look at it. So the movie may initially seem like a simple story about a good guy, but on the other hand, it is also a stunning drama about friendship, love, survival, and personal choice in life. And if you dive deep, you can see something hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. In this video, I have put together 6 levels of understanding of this movie. We'll start with the easiest levels and progress to the more complex ones. And at the very end, I will give the most daring and unexpected interpretation of this masterpiece. Ready to take this adventure? Then let's get started. By the way, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell too. Don't miss my new videos. Level 1. A simple story about a good man. This one is the easiest level of understanding the movie. Forrest Gump is simply a movie about a good guy who lives a happy life despite his hardships. He's kind, sincere, and honest, and that's why everything works out for him. Simple, right? But stop for a second. Think about it. If Forrest is so naive and simple, why does this movie touch millions of hearts? Why does it make us laugh, cry, and reflect on our lives? Could there be something more behind this simplicity? This level of understanding is for those who watch the movie superficially. A success story. A guy with disabilities becomes a soccer star, a military hero, a millionaire. We are shown that honesty and hard work lead to success. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry claimed that we all come from childhood, referring to that pure source of inner energy that drives one to act with sincerity and selflessness. But is this the only message of the movie? Let's look deeper. Level 2. A story about strength of character. Now imagine what it's like to be Forrest. He's seen as not very smart, he's laughed at, he's underestimated. But instead of breaking down, he keeps moving forward. Forrest doesn't think about hardship. He runs when he's asked to run. He saves his friends because he thinks it's the right thing to do. He stays loyal to Jenny because he loves her with all his soul. Think back to the moment when Forrest becomes the table tennis champion. He's not doubting, he's just practicing. Or the scene in the war where he pulls out wounded comrades because his mom told him to do what's right. This level of understanding tells us strength is not in intelligence, but in character. Being smart doesn't mean being successful. Being strong doesn't mean being happy. The important thing is to follow your path. This idea is close to the philosophy of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path itself." Forrest doesn't fight the world. He accepts it and moves on without looking back at failure. Level 3. Portrait of an era. Now imagine you are caught up in a historical maelstrom of events. Wars, protests, revolutions, the rise and fall of ideas. The whole world is buzzing, boiling, searching for meaning, screaming for justice. And now look at Forrest. He goes through it all, but he stays the same. Why? Forrest Gump is a mirror of society in the second half of the 20th century. He finds himself inside all the key events: the Vietnam War, anti-war protests, the hippie movement, the rise of the tech giants. But unlike everyone around him, he doesn't try to analyze, fight, break, or build. He just lives. And that's how he exposes the absurdity of what's going on around him. Look at his participation in the Vietnam War. He doesn't talk politics. He doesn't question the meaning of the conflict. He just follows orders and saves his friends. At this time, politicians and generals fight wars not to win, but for their careers and status. Remember his meeting with President Nixon. He finds himself inside one of the most high-profile political scandals in the United States, but he understands absolutely nothing about it. But one of the most striking moments is his running. He's just running, not knowing why. And what happens? People start to follow him. They look for a symbol in him, a leader, a new prophet. But at some point, he just stops and walks away because he's tired. All his followers are shocked. What are we supposed to do now? This episode illustrates Albert Camus' point perfectly. Camus said that absurdity is the collision of the human quest for meaning with the indifference of the universe. People are always looking for meaning, even where there is none. Forrest wasn't looking for meaning, but he became a symbol for others. So maybe that's the central irony of the movie. The 20th century is mired in the search for ideas, for justification, for meaning, for truth and justice. And what about Forrest? He lives. He acts. He moves forward without clinging to explanations. It is in the contrast of the main character's image that we understand the essence of the 20th century. It's a genius move by the filmmakers. Level 4. Metaphorical. Life is like a box of chocolates. Now think about it. How many times has something happened in your life that you couldn't predict? You made plans, calculated every detail, but suddenly life unfolded in a completely different way. At times like this, there is only one thing left to do. Either fight what has already happened, or accept it and move on. The movie Forrest Gump, on this level, ceases to be just a story of one man. It is a parable about the unpredictability of life. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. This phrase, said by Forrest's mom, becomes the key idea of the whole movie. We never know what's around the next corner, but that's the beauty of life. Forrest goes off to war with no idea of its meaning, but ends up becoming a hero. He starts running just for no reason, but his running becomes an event for thousands of people. He accidentally invests in Apple without realizing it and becomes a millionaire. Isn't that how life works? But there is a very important point here. It's not just the fact of coincidence that's important. It's Forrest's reaction. He doesn't resist what's happening to him. He doesn't try to control his fate. He doesn't look for complicated explanations. He just does what feels right. John Lennon once said, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." I never cease to be amazed at the genius of the makers of this movie. After all, John Lennon's appearance in the movie was not accidental either. We cannot control every detail of our lives, but we can choose how we treat them. Forrest Gump reminds us, sometimes you just have to go forward trusting life, even if you don't know where it will take you. Level 5. Existential. Choice or destiny? Now let's compare the two main characters, Forrest and Jenny. One accepts the world as it is, the other tries to run away from it, to find meaning in protest, in addictions, in destroying herself. Think of the scene where Jenny stands on the edge of the balcony. In that moment, she is balancing between life and death. And what about Forrest? He just loves her. He just waits. Here the movie raises the question, are we in control of our lives? Forrest lives a life of acceptance. He does what he can without question. Jenny, on the other hand, tries to find freedom, but every choice she makes leads to new suffering. At the end of the movie, Forrest ponders whether fate exists or whether everything depends on our actions. In the moment when Forrest is standing at Jenny's grave, he says, "I don't know if we each have a destiny, or if we're all just floating around accidental-like on a breeze, but I think maybe it's both. Maybe both is happening at the same time." This is the key philosophical point of the movie. The movie makes us think that maybe we have only one choice in life, to accept the world or to fight it. Jenny relentlessly searches for freedom and loses herself. And Forrest, who seeks nothing, finds everything. Level 6. Forrest as God incarnate. This interpretation is the most unexpected, but I think that makes it particularly interesting. Let's look at it not from the perspective of religion, but from the perspective of philosophy. Imagine for a moment that God decided to descend into our world, not in the form of a great ruler, performing miracles in front of everyone, but in the form of a simple, sincere man. Without special knowledge, without aspiration for greatness, without attempts to impose his will. Suddenly, it would appear that such a God would be simply unrecognized, precisely because of his modesty and openness. We find this idea in various religious and philosophical traditions. If the divine presence came to people in earthly form, who would be able to recognize it? And here we have Forrest Gump, the very soul that remains when you remove fear, ego, desires, doubts. He is like a Zen monk who does not try to overcome problems with complicated schemes and plans, but simply gets up and peels potatoes, catches fish, or runs across the continent without complaining about fate. His divinity hides in the fact that he doesn't judge, doesn't argue, doesn't try to prove a point. He just acts. Think of Lieutenant Dan, a man who has lost everything and decided his life is over. He rebels against God, against fate, against himself. He's angry, he's frustrated, he curses everything around him. But Forrest doesn't try to argue with him, doesn't try to lecture him. He just continues to be there for him, helping him and accepting his pain. And it is this presence that ultimately gives Lieutenant Dan back his lost peace. All his rage and resistance is extinguished, for it is pointless to argue with sincere goodness. In a sense, it is the same unconditional love traditionally attributed to God. And at the end, I would like to say the following. Maybe the feather that flies at the beginning and at the end of the movie is Forrest himself. It does not choose where to fly, but there is beauty, harmony, and naturalness in its flight. What did you think and feel when you watched this movie? What interpretation is closest to you? Tell us in the comments. It will be interesting. And now I highly recommend you to watch my other video where I talk about 6 levels of understanding of the movie The Shawshank Redemption. You just got the link to the video on your screen. And if you enjoyed this video, then hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I did my best. And I'll see you on the video about The Shawshank Redemption.